A civil war you've never heard of in Asia is the latest battleground between authoritarian countries and an impotent West that still wants to believe that they can support democracy with just a couple of kind words. Just what's happening in the Myanmar civil war, and why is it proof that popularity is a strategic advantage? Let's get into it. Okay, so you guys heard of the Myanmar civil war? Seems pretty crazy. Short answer is, since 2021, the country's been embroiled in an ongoing civil war. Now, in 2021, there was a military coup ousting a democratically elected government, replacing it with a military dictatorship. The result is that the democratically elected government and what they call the National League for Democracy simply formed an exiled, what they call a national unity government. And under it were a series of ethnic armed organizations that had always kind of existed and were seen as being sort of local armed organizations, right? Maybe local constabularies or local militia meant to augment and protect individual ethnicities within the country. But once the military took over, a lot of individuals and these armed organizations started to work under the National Unity Government, aspiring to create a representative federalist system where each state and ethnicity got a high level of autonomy and worked under a democratically representative government. This, of course, is an unbelievably popular system relative to, a military dictatorship, and has drawn a lot of fighters. Now, what's fascinating is that the National Unity Government declared a state of emergency across the nation and launched what it called a People's Defensive War against the SAC, the military coup, right? And at first, this was a small, low-level insurgency, almost comical, using simple IEDs and landmines, operating in local communities that were strongly opposed to the government, went after soft government targets like police stations, outposts, and military-owned businesses. Because again, in countries like this, when the military takes over, they also generally have sprawling business interests, right? You're not just a general, you also own a contracting company that provides services often to the military. That's pretty standard how these things go. Now, in 2022, it looked like a pretty small conflict, relatively speaking, killing just 2,000 SAC soldiers and militiamen. But things have escalated a lot, in fact. And by 2024, what we're seeing now is a huge rebel offensive. The rebels are now very well equipped, very effective in their tactics, and the military junta looks increasingly beleaguered. But that's not the real story here, right? Because right now, again, the rebels control nearly 40% of the country. The military controls a mere 40% of the country. 60% of it is under control of the rebels. But you can see that this has been a sprawling war and a true proper war. But what's fascinating is that what we're seeing is that, well, the People's Defense Force, this is the aggregate militia group, looks very impressive, right? 100,000 strong, part of the Ministry of Defense of the National Unity Government, a sprawling number of ethnic armies. But you might notice there's a missing thing here, which is support, right? What does it mean to have, where's the foreign support? Who's looking out for them? In fact, you can see their equipment. The PDF has no state backers. It operates a mixture of makeshift, locally manufactured, and captured foreign manufactured small arms. Right? Many PDF subgroups used bolt-action rifles at first, and some used homemade hunting rifles. Some PDF troops were not armed at all. But by 2023, you saw better and better firearms, including weapons seized from the military, and even in some cases, simple manufacturing facilities in rebel-controlled territory, or really legitimate government-controlled territory. You see also the PDF launching its own arms manufacturing capabilities, making not just economically producible variants of the M16, M4, AK-47, and ammunition like 5.56, 7.62, and 9mm, right? Now, so the takeaway here is that, it looks like the military junta is doing pretty badly against a popular force, but no Western country is backing these guys up. But the military dictatorship, they are turning to old familiar friends for help, right? You can see that they are leaning more heavily on Russia, which has been a longtime military backer of the junta, providing their air force something that is a decisive advantage to the military council, right? They're meeting, in fact, the leader of this junta met directly with Vladimir Putin, validating them as the legitimate rulers of the country, something no Western country has been willing to do. And there's thoughts that now Russian drone tech might also end up in the hands of the military junta. So, of course, both the Myanmar's government and Russia's government are subject to international sanctions over human rights violations, sort of pushing them into each other's favor, right? Now, officially, they have some kind of big nuclear energy agreement, but the junta is so beleaguered, again, controlling just a tiny portion of the country, that they are almost certainly not going to be able to implement any kind of real development plan. But that's okay, because, again, Putin, the real ask was for drone technology to back up the military dictatorship, right? Putin, of course, has been a longtime major supplier of military gear to them, providing them helicopters, jets, armored vehicles, and artillery, which, of course, I mean, you can predict. The military junta has engaged in a sweeping series of war crimes against civilian populations, obviously. It almost goes without saying. But the more interesting part is, again, that we see also China is also out here backing the military dictatorship, right? And again, you can see that China is a major weapons supplier, providing technical assistance, investment, and China really cares a lot about instability and a civil war on its border, and views a strong military as something they can relate directly to. China is engaged in a lot of diplomatic links with the military dictatorship, and has pressured some ethnic resistance groups on the border by cutting off trade and electricity to prevent them from attacking the junta's forces. So again, China running the same playbook they play in Ukraine, where they say, we don't have a side, but we're only going to help one side, right? And I think the takeaway here that you guys should have, one, is that despite having no state support, despite DIYing everything, which, by the way, guys, the rebel forces, you can see, this is a map of their drone strikes. You can see that in January 2024, they really began to scale up their drone operations, going from literally almost none in January of 2022 to launching large-scale drone offensives. They actually built a bunch of drones. You can see here, January 2024 was actually the mark of a large-scale rebel operation involving drone strikes here in the Sagaing part of the country. And you can see, look at these very familiar looking drones, multi-rotor, fixed wing, delta wing, and VTOL drones, all being used by the Myanmar military. But the Myanmar military doesn't need to operate drones as much because they have an air force. But it's the rebels who basically are using drones as their air force. And you can see here on this map, resistance forces absolutely just smoking the military in terms of their use of these military drones. And this includes both drones that have been civilian drones reconfigured, and also increasingly homemade combat drones that function as kamikaze drones. But the takeaway, again, that I want you guys to have is that, one, democracy, the right of people that live in a place to decide through broad-based civic participation and voting how that place should be run, is so popular that it is able to effectively oppose a military dictatorship backed by two of the largest militaries in the globe, Russia and China. But to me, the more significant part is, first off, this is another piece of evidence of what you could call World War III, or the new Cold War, or the new realignment, where Russia and Chinese interests align again. And that their allies, the people they back, are not representative democracies. They are dictatorships, authoritarians. And every time you see this, you see, again, another piece of evidence of cooperation and this emergence of an anti-Western axis that everywhere across the globe is trying to put their finger on the scale to ensure that more military dictatorships emerge and fewer democracies and representative forms of government take hold. And despite that, and despite the fact that the United States, the really military defender of Western values, is asleep at the wheel on this one, despite the fact that no other country is aiding these PDF forces, they are still just the very prospect of people getting a say in how their country is run is so appealing, so intrinsically good, so speaks to the values of the people in these countries, that it still is able to create a massive resistance movement capable of not just winning hearts and minds, but when the chips are down, actually fighting and winning a war. The insane part is that the number one source of recruitment for these People's Defense Forces, it's the military dictatorship themselves. Soldiers within that dictatorship are so disgusted by what they're asked to do, by what their government is doing, that they defect en masse over to the PDF, taking weapons and technical know-how with them. So again, to me, this is just an illustration of the fact that a West that understood, that comprehended the threats that it was facing, and not just America, right? Europe has a comparably sized population, a comparable commitment to democracy and representative government, a comparable economic ability to produce the sort of wealth and assistance that's needed, and comparable technical expertise in the intelligence field. It has all the components, but Europe is also just utterly head in the sand, utterly impotent, utterly unable to look even a few miles beyond its own borders in how to defend its interests abroad, and how to and just are unable to recognize that something that China and Russia look at these places and say, we should expand our influence into these places. We have to. And the fact that the West is looking and going, no, you guys can have it. You guys can have it. And that they don't see China and Russia as a threat. They don't see them as an anti-democratic force actively pushing democratic movements back around the world, including within Europe and the United States, by the way. They are just totally ignorant to the threat that this poses. Anyway, guys, thanks to folks like Alfred Chesky Allen, that's in Christine Schumann, Deborah Oppenheimer. You guys can become members too for Combat Vet News, get access to uncensored combat footage and more. Just hit the become a member button in YouTube and select a specialist tier or above, or become a member at combatvetnews.com. Cheers.